Today we wanted to talk some more, mostly open world games that feel truly lived in. Now, we've covered this in a part one, a previous video, and it's hard to top that one, but we've got more places and games to talk about today. We're taking a look at game worlds that truly put the work in to make it feel like you're in a real, alive place. From artificial intelligence of the citizens to just, general art and level design and graphics and stuff. And we've got a lot of fun and exciting places to talk about here, so let's get started off with number 10. Liberty City from Grand Theft Auto 4 specifically is a place that truly feels alive. Now, yes, I know it's a pretty muddy, old-looking game. It's from 2008 now, so some of it doesn't quite hold up, but there is still a shocking amount of detail in this world. From it being one of the first open-world games to really have a dense amount of garbage and just general stuff littering the sidewalks to the actual level of detail of buildings and designs in different districts, it really felt like a real place. And what was important there was that they didn't just completely one-to-one remake New York City that it was based off of. No, what this is kind of inspired by New York. It takes cues, it takes landmarks, and it takes just the feeling of New York and kind of makes its own thing out of it. Every single one of the boroughs in Liberty City feels completely distinct and like its own place, and also a really good and fun representation of the real world locations while standing out on their own. Broker was based on Brooklyn, Dukes was based on Queens, Bohan was based on the Bronx, and Algonquin was Manhattan. Then there's Alderney to the side, which is technically like New Jersey. No other game world to this point has really gotten an East Coast city like this. I mean, we're talking years later with this game, and no other game nails the feel like Grand Theft Auto 4. It feels like a real place. Of course, we also got to mention the NPCs. While you can argue that they're mostly fodder, they're pretty goofy, they still do things as they walk around, they respond to you, you can mess with them, they don't feel completely mindless. And coming from the older Grand Theft Auto games, it truly felt like a step up. We could talk about all the other details that Rockstar adds in, like the radio stations, just the type of culture going on in this city, from the actual stores and advertisements and how it creates a real world, but really, it's just about the feeling, the atmosphere, and for that, it feels 100% lived in. Next, over at number 9, we have Kingdom Come Deliverance. This takes place in the Holy Roman Empire and plops you down in medieval Bohemia, and it is a very, very faithful representation of that area. Granted, there's only certain accounts, there's no photographs, and we don't know exactly what it was like back then, but the developers behind this game went to painstaking lengths to really preserve historical accuracy, yes, number one, but also just give it a real good sense of place. Trees are dense, foliage is dense, forests are convincing, you feel like you can get lost in them, but it's really those towns and castles where citizens inhabit that make it feel so real. From the muddy, gross, disgusting streets to the animal life, to the good visual flair and lighting here and there, especially with like night and day stuff, but really, it's the NPCs themselves. They have their own artificial intelligence that runs on a day and night cycle, so they go about and they do their things. They go to work, they go home, and while it's not the first game to really do that, here it just works so well and really makes it feel like this real operating place. You really get to understand how people lived and worked back in the Middle Ages. There's a mundane level to it, but that's important because that's how life sometimes is. It feels like a world where people live, and that's the point of this list. Next, over at number 8, we have Far Cry 6. Now, a lot of you guys said in the comments of the last video that we should have acknowledged one of the Far Cry games, so for now, we're going to, and we're just going to go with the most recent one, because the fictional island of Yara from Far Cry 6, which was kind of like a representation of like a Caribbean island or like a Cuba or something like that, really nailed it. Say what you will about the game, maybe it's not your favorite Far Cry game, whatever, that's not the point of this list. What is important is the fact that they really went to great lengths to make it feel like a real place, not only with a gorgeous, beautiful Caribbean countryside filled with agriculture, small villages and huts, churches, animals, all kinds of people, fishermen, anything, but also the main central city of the game, the capital city, had its own unique architecture and depth that really actually made it feel like it had history. This was a world that had problems, that had things going on, people have been suffering before you came around as the player, but with advertisements, billboards, regular old places, and gas stations, it manages to feel like a real place. A place where, yes, there is suffering, there is oppression, but it's not just video game violence and bad guys for the sake of it. There was a real place here. I mean, the fact that the game has main roads, city streets, but then also hidden side areas and streets and shortcuts that were essentially like cut out by the resistance just adds a level of detail and history to it. From the cities down to like the home base areas where you could wander around in third person, it really felt like a dense village filled with chickens, ramshackled fences, detailed buildings. It was really cool. Far Cry 6, if it's gonna be remembered for anything, I think it's gonna be for Yara specifically. Next, over at number 7, we have Fallout 4 and the Commonwealth. This is another one where, say what you will about the game, Bethesda built a really detailed and dense world here that you actually believe that people live there. People managed to pull themselves out from the apocalypse and cobble together some sort of life. I mean, you're doing it yourself with the base building, but really it's the settlements, it's the places you go and see that are really richly detailed, like visually overstimulating, but in a way that isn't just like a cool detailed city street from another game. With Fallout, it's really just how everything is cobbled together. I mean, one of the first cities you visit in the game is built into a baseball field, a baseball stadium, Fenway Park. And it is an absolute mess, and I mean that with respect. But what that mess really does is make you think that people actually live there, that people actually put this together. After the apocalypse, the end of the world, not everybody's going to be a master carpenter or a builder, but they're gonna do what they can. And that's what you love to see about the Fallout games. From the world that's blown up, the world of the past, you see how lived in that really was, of course, but it's the new stuff that people built up that is also worth celebrating. It's that other thing that really makes it feel like a legitimate place. Next, over at number 6, we're going to cheat a little bit and talk Metro Exodus. While it's not technically an open world game, it's really a collection of smaller open areas, it still really establishes a strong sense of place. The whole series really has, from the early days of citizens living in subway stations and train cars, it just felt really detailed, to Metro Exodus's kind of region-hopping adventure where you get to see a lot more of this post-apocalyptic world, of course, what was left behind, but what is also cropping up now in the future, like Fallout, but very different here. Everything to it is really, for lack of a better phrase, dark and gritty, but with that comes some really good stuff. I mean, everything from this game, from your base of operations, the whole train thing that does feel like a place where people live, to the metro station at the start, to the desert region and all the blown out buildings there, to the swampy, woodsy areas with ramshackle shacks, to enemy outpost base that are kind of constructed out of wood and steel. There's just a lot to look at with Metro Exodus and really savor. I know you're worried about running around and killing monsters and bad guys and stuff like that, but really soaking it all in, there is a lot to feast on here. Next, over at number 5, Assassin's Creed Odyssey is worth mentioning. In the last video, we selected the GOAT, I would say, in my opinion, AC Syndicate, but the newer Assassin's Creed games, the trilogy of the big open world RPG ones, have also been very richly detailed. And you know what? We'll give Greece some love today because it has so many real world locations, the famous historical landmarks that tourists from all over the world flock to Greece to see, to just how built out it is and how these ancient cities are truly realized with dwellings for the citizens, dense city marketplaces, tons of commerce going on, from the busy markets but to fishermen, to agriculture and lots of farms, and people out in the open world where it feels pretty empty and wild. You'll always kind of stumble across a villager or somebody doing something that really makes it feel alive. Also, I mean, the fact that Assassin's Creed Odyssey is also just massive. Despite it being so massive and riddled with tons of water and tons of landmarks, it doesn't feel like a waste of space, or it doesn't feel like stuff is just stretched out and empty. It feels like a place where people live, and even when you don't see people sometimes, you still kind of feel it. You still kind of understand it. You know what I mean? Next, over at number 4, let's talk Dying Light 2. Now, we probably will reserve a whole video for Haran from Dying Light 1, but Dying Light 2 deserves some props with Villador. The city is absolutely massive and feels real and convincing. There's old Villador and then like the newer downtown area with the big skyscrapers and stuff, but really it's old Villador, the old city that really feels like a place that people live. Not from before the zombie times, but with their new establishments. Seeing the factions really kind of take control of areas distinctly makes a hell of a difference and makes a place feel alive. From people densely occupying a church, building up little shacks within it, and within its walls managing to also have livestock and crops, to the fact that another faction just kind of totally takes up shop in an aircraft carrier, it is very cool to see, and it makes sense. Like, you get to see where people hang out, where they train, where they eat, where they drink, what they go do. While the NPCs themselves are pretty simple for the most part, it's still really just seeing them in their dwellings, but also out in the world when you're running around on rooftops. You'll still manage to stumble across someone, and it makes it feel like other people are just kind of up to doing stuff like you are. Next, down at number 3, let's talk about Mafia. We'll talk about specifically today the definitive edition and its city of Lost Heaven. This place is truly incredible. While it's not the most interactive city, there's still a decent amount of interiors and really just a lot of different district variety that makes it feel convincing. You see industry, you see the grime, you see the dirt, you see the filth, then you see the flashiness of the 1930s and all its glory with the big downtown city centers. From the big epic lights of the big city to the dim, dirtier lights of the outskirts. It does a good job of really setting up how this city is laid out, but also like where people work and reside. Seeing where immigrants came over and took whatever they could and lived however they could to survive is really well established here. The game really provides a lot more than you'd expect because it's otherwise pretty simple. You know, like I said, interactive wise, like you can crash your car and stuff, but you can't really do too much with NPCs, but still. From the slummy outskirts to the bigger parts to some pretty rich interiors, like of course the bar, to the pretty cool countryside. You know, there's a lot to Lost Heaven. It's a pretty simple, straightforward open world that we still think is worth celebrating, especially because it's just damn gorgeous. I mean, look at it. Now down to number 2, of course, you know we were going to mention it, Cyberpunk's Night City. Cyberpunk 2077, of course, we've talked about it a lot, has definitely had a resurgence. CD Projekt Red fixed a lot of the problems with it, but from the beginning, Night City was a pretty incredible place. That, of course, like I can use all the words I used for a lot of the other points, you know, dense, richly detailed, yada yada yada. It has all that, from the grime, the garbage, to the high sci-fi type fancy stuff. No, but what really makes it feel like a real place is just how massive it truly is. And while it's definitely not the biggest game world out there, there's something to it that just makes it feel really big. I don't know if it's the surrounding areas combined with like the city itself and just how massive the skyscrapers truly feel. It's hard to put my finger on it, but it just feels big. You really feel like a small fish in a big pond. Especially now that the game is updated and truly working property and there's way more NPCs around, it just feels like it has some true bustle to it, from the traffic to the sidewalks. It's got a good feel to it, and just the amount of stuff thrown everywhere, the amount of ramen stands, electronic shops, little vendors, it's like endless. And while I know you can't interact with every single thing, there's still just so much thrown at you that is just like real life. You go to a new city, you're smacked in the face with tons of things left and right all the time. And Cyberpunk 2077 really does a good job nailing that. Night City throws a lot at you, and so does real life. Now over at number 1, in another direction, let's give some love to Watch Dogs. All of them really do a great job building out cities, but the one that really clicked with us from a world sense was really Watch Dogs 2's San Francisco. They straight up made a real world San Francisco, or a near future San Francisco, with all of its surrounding areas and districts that feels legit. It feels real. From Chicago in the first one to London with Watch Dogs Legion, they really do a damn good job just building out straightforward, good, convincing open worlds. While yes, it's another game with a big city where you steal cars, you drive around, you crash into stuff, you get chased by the cops, yeah, they just do a good job. And San Francisco specifically with Watch Dogs 2, it got a lot of recognition for the NPCs and just what they do and how you can interact with them. It kind of is a little bit more than you would expect for a game like this, where they're typically just fodder. NPCs will talk to each other, they'll get into fights, they'll start things with you. There's just a lot of surprises to be had, and the unpredictability of the NPCs coupled with everything else they built just makes it feel alive as hell. It may not be the best game or anything like that, but the world is really cool. Those are some more lived-in game worlds that we just really wanted to take a minute to talk about, so let us know if you got more examples in the combat, because we love pulling from you guys. The first video we came up with ourselves, the second one we got some input from you guys, so let us know open worlds that feel alive to you for a part 3 video. Definitely go check out the first video, we will link it, it's one of my favorite top 10s we've ever done. But if you enjoyed this video, clicking the like button's all you gotta do. It legitimately helps us out if you just like talking games with us. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.